This is Good Karma Wrestling. Welcome to another edition of GKW. I'm Gabe Neitzer from ESPN Milwaukee. With me tonight from ESPN West Palm, he is Brian Rowitz. Our guy Jay Hood off tonight. Arch Madness happening in St. Louis. That's right. Mid-major basketball tournaments happening this week. So our guy Jay Hood has to be in St. Louis for that. So we will certainly miss him, especially when we start talking about the Hall of Fame. We won't have our historian with us this evening, but, just kind of the way it goes. It was a great week of professional wrestling, no doubt about it. AEW put on one of their best pay-per-views in recent memory with AEW Revolution over the weekend, Sting's final match. It was a great pay-per-view. Other than the All-Star 8-man thing, I think
not needed.
I think everything else really, really hit. And even with that 8-man, like Wardlow winning, at least accomplishes something. Sure. So it wasn't for nothing. And then I thought it was a pretty good Dynamite last night. And I mean, the ratings maybe don't agree with it. We don't really necessarily care about the ratings. I thought it was a great show. It seems like AEW has a little bit of momentum right now. So where we start tonight is this. How does AEW best keep this momentum going coming out of Revolution and then into Dynamite, which also saw the debut of the newest member of not just the AEW roster, the Elites, in Okada?
That's the thing. So we found out April 21st, you have Dynasty in St. Louis. So another new pay-per-view coming up. Big Business is next week. So we're expecting in 6 days' time, Mercedes Moné to make her AEW debut. There is a lot of momentum. There was general consensus on Twitter of, wow, this might be the best ever AEW pay-per-view. Every match delivered outside of the 8-man, every single match delivered on that night. And this is the hottest AEW's felt in a while, but we've seen so much with AEW, whether it comes with booking or matches and sometimes injuries, where they are so hot and then they just sort of come down a little bit. They've got to keep riding right now. The thing at the top of my list, we talked about it last week, the world title. I thought Swerve was going to win last week. He somehow did not win and got more over. That place was rocking last night for him in Duluth or wherever they were. Like, they were excited for Swerve.
They kept saying Atlanta, Duluth. Like, they kept mixing up whatever they were calling it, which was weird, but whatever.
In Georgia last night, they were excited for Swerve. So to me, the way you keep it moving, you got to put the belt on him. It seems like we're going Joe versus Swerve at Dynasty because next week is Joe and Wardlow already. So you talk about it was a good thing Wardlow won, but I think he's losing next week. And I don't want to see another three-way at the pay-per-view. Put the world title on Swerve right now. He's hot. He's your most over babyface. Ride it to the moon, and let's see what we got going right now.
I mean, that being said, Greensboro also loved themselves as Samoa Joe. Like, Joe was super over in Greensboro on Sunday night. Like, I don't want to completely dismiss Samoa Joe.
Sure. No, Joe is great, but come on, it's Swerve's time.
I mean, I'm curious to see where they go with it. I mean, if it is Swerve versus Joe in St. Louis, like, yes, then Swerve has to win. But if they can find a way to push it off further, if, Hangman Adam Page comes back and they have another match, those two, much like the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros, they're in Fight Forever territory. Like, yep, just heat it up and I am going to sit back and enjoy the hell out of it. Like, that's just the way that feud goes. So if they do another Hangman versus Swerve match at that pay-per-view and then push it off to Double or Nothing, I'd be okay with that too. Like, I think there's a way to do it. But the next time that Swerve challenges Joe, yes, Swerve has to go over. I'm 100% with you there. And speaking of Double or Nothing, I feel like I always come back to it because it felt like in 2022 they had this. This was the last time I felt this way about AEW with all the momentum they had coming out of a pay-per-view was Double or Nothing. And they had a couple of things work against them. They had injuries with, Bryan Danielson, injuries with CM Punk, and, then they kind of dropped some things because they decided they really needed to make the push for Forbidden Door, and they dropped some AEW storylines. So there were a number of different things that kind of led to that momentum slowing down. But it feels like, especially with the addition that they're making, that some of these things can really start heating up with Mercedes Moné, as you mentioned, with Okada, the Elites. But this was something that I think that they can do in terms of sustaining the momentum and maybe putting together better Dynamites. And I don't know why this didn't hit me before, and it just kind of hit me for the first time last night with the way they started the show with Swerve coming out and then Joe, and then they have the match. they very rarely
Very.
give multiple segments to any storyline. Like, maybe they'll advance some sort of storyline with a quick backstage segment like we saw with Tony Storm last night, Mariah May getting her first t-shirt, teasing the Tony Awards with an eye, because again, they don't want to get sued.
Of course, got to be safe there.
Yeah, no, of course, you got to make sure everything's buttoned up
Right.
there. But very rarely, and the one thing that WWE does, especially, they do it on Raw because they've got 3 hours in one night and it's a lot, but there's always the through line of like the most important thing. Like let's just say with the bloodline. With the bloodline, a lot of times, if they're going to be the last segment, Roman Reigns isn't wrestling on TV. That's just not the way it works. But you have multiple segments of, Paul Heyman backstage, and they're doing all these different things. And the bloodline is like the through line of SmackDown. Or Cody Rhodes right now is the through line. Or you see multiple segments with the Judgment Day. They're always, it's very rarely, this is the Intercontinental segment.
Right.
This is going to be the women's segment. This is going to be the World Championship segment. And you're seeing the convergence of a lot of those storylines and with what happened at the end of Monday Night Raw. So last night for the first time, and they just kind of gave it the first half hour. But I think that's something that they could do, because one of our biggest complaints with AEW is a lot of times the AEW World Championships feels like it's dragging you down.
Sure.
Make Samoa Joe more important. You feature him multiple times throughout the show. Feature him in the first hour and the second hour. Feature Swerve in the first hour and the second hour. Like, make sure you take what the important things are and kind of have that through line of your show. I think that's going to be really important in terms of AEW keeping the momentum going. If people are loving Swerve Strickland, let's give him Swerve Strickland. Let's give him, a promo at the beginning of the show and then a main event match at the end. And last night still ended up being kind of segmented because that was kind of put in the corner of the first half hour of the show. And then, you just kind of segmented it the rest of the way, which ended in a fantastic main event match. But like, you just don't have, despite having all these factions and all these things that can interact with each other, very rarely do they interact with each other.
Yeah, that's interesting when you put it that way, because even last night, like with that 2 segment from the world title, we got an impromptu match, which we don't often see on Dynamite. Like getting that tag match that was not pre-advertised, like that is something different. So you had that going. The other thing, which I don't know if it's a positive or negative, like a lot of times we see variety in their main events. Like you talk about the way Raw and SmackDown do it. We know the bloodline's going to be there. We know Jey Uso, Cody, Drew. You can pick and choose. The people, the players are going to be in the main events of those shows. You can't do that with AEW. And last night we got Ospreay, which is definitely one of their prized toys right now. But you got a Kyle Fletcher, who, is not. Like, he's a Ring of Honor television champion. He's a tag team guy. And like you said, put on a hell of a match. But there isn't that story and that intrigue. It was like, ooh, I want to see him versus Will Ospreay. And we get the thing at the end with Brian. But they're doing a good job right now. There's so many stories. Like, we are a month and a half out from Dynasty, the first ever. And you can almost put together a card right now that will be one hell of a card. You got Joe versus Swerve. They do Ospreay versus Brian. Maybe the end of the tag tournament, like Mercedes and Serena Deeb. Like, there is stuff there that you're like, all right, let's go. They're doing a better job at telling stories and building out pay-per-views, which is something we've knocked them for in the past.
Yeah, but I would like to have that main event means something more. And look, again, and this is not a complaint about what they did last night, because you're going to put Will Ospreay in the main event. Like, if Will Ospreay is willing to put on that match for free on television, you just let him do it, right? But I just want to see that through line. Like, okay, if you want Will Ospreay, because here's the thing, they have so many good damn wrestlers on that roster.
Right.
You can kind of rotate through of the thing of the night. But I think you can kind of highlight some different things and then have these matches at the end. I just think being able to highlight more instead of just like trying to get everybody in, because that's AEW's problem right now. Right. Their pay-per-views get a little long because they're trying to jam everybody in, which is why we had an 8-man all-star slugfest, whatever they ended up calling it on Sunday night, which didn't need to happen. Like, you could have just completely gotten rid. You could have done that match on Collision to give, especially if you're just going to have Wardlow wrestle on a Dynamite for this, right? Like, it's not setting up anything major. It's not like a Money in the Bank or a Royal Rumble or anything like that. So you could have done that on Collision to give Collision a little bit more juice. So I want to see whether it's Collision, whether it's Dynamite. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do it on Revolution, on on Rampage.
Right, yeah.
Because the Rampage formula works. Banger match in the beginning, a couple of filler matches, banger match at the end, and you get 3 hour of television. But with Collision and with Dynamite, I think if they start featuring more people, I think they've got an opportunity to really start highlighting Swerve, really start highlighting Danielson, Mox, Joe, MJF when he comes back, Okada, the Elite, Omega when he comes back. Like, I think you've got an opportunity where you can do that instead of just trying to keep everything in its like proper place.
Yes, but the one thing I will say and give him credit for last night, we've knocked them before where you had the banger match of the pay-per-view, the big story, and then we don't see that person on Wednesday. It's like, wait, remember how hot person X was? Looking at like the winners from this weekend, they all were there last night. Darby was in a prominent segment with Jay White. Joe was there. Swerve was there. Roderick Strong was there. Tony Storm, Eddie Kingston, Bryan Danielson, Christian, Ospreay, Wardlow. All of them were on the show last night.
Yeah, the only thing we didn't have was BCC, which is fine because again, you have to save something for Collision, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, when you compare it to a WWE pay-per-view, oh man, they got all this momentum. Well, not everything's going to be on Raw because, you know, like if the Bloodline did something big, it's not going to be on Raw. It's going to be on SmackDown, right? So you can't jam everything into just those 2 hours. So I think having FTR or BCC, although you did have Bryan Danielson come out at the end, like, yeah, I mean, they were able to build on the momentum and continue storylines or make the pivot because of the end of the match to different storylines, right? I thought they did, you know, like you said, I think they did a good job of that. It's, can you keep this going is the problem. Like, Tony's shown the ability of, okay, I've got a couple of good shows, and then they just...
Right. And that's we say we don't care about ratings, but like, they did under 800,000 last night, and it worries me that Tony might overreact to that. Like, well, no, we got to be higher. We got to be closer to 1 million and not do what we saw last night. And like, that's one of my worries tonight after seeing that rating.
I mean, I think you just have to stay the course. Like, if you believe what you're doing, and look, maybe this is because I played baseball, right? Like the process over the results.
Sure.
You know, like, you know, sometimes you're 0 for 4 and you hit 4 line drives. Sometimes you're 2 for 4 and seeing eye single and a little blooper that fell into the outfield, right? Like, you just have to stay true to your process and trust that in the end, the results are going to come. I think that's what he has to do. You know, March is tough. Basketball season's heating up. Some good college basketball games last night. The NBA, I think everything's heating up. Maybe those are excuses, but and maybe that's just me being hopeful. Because again, I thought last night, I don't care what the rating was. I thought last night was a hell of a show.
Right.
I thought it was a great show.
And that's the thing with AEW, like we talk about keeping it going, be different, be the non-WWE. Like, yes, we can do the fun stuff, do the storyline stuff. They have opportunities over these next few weeks. Mercedes Moné, feature that women's division prominently. WWE is doing that a lot more, but do it better. Tag team. We talk about tag team wrestling a lot. You're going to have a tournament for the tag titles. Let those teams just go. They have a strong tag division. Let them go and be non-WWE and just lean into that these next few weeks.
We want to talk about some of the other big things going on in the world of professional wrestling. We like to call it our 3 count, the other top 30 stories. Brian, what's number 1 this week?
Becky Lynch, while promoting her book, was on Down Under the Ring talking about herself and Seth Rollins and said, quote, "We are undoubtedly the greatest wrestling relationship, in the history of wrestling, the greatest couple in the history of wrestling." So who is the greatest couple in wrestling history?
All right. So I wrote down a few here. Currently going, probably true, right? Because, we're talking about Bianca Belair, Montez Ford. Like, they don't match up.
Right.
Right. But I don't know if they're the best in history. I think they probably still have a ways to go.
One more I'll throw for the current, and it might just be lopsided. Rhea and Buddy. Rhea's doing a lot of lifting there of that couple.
But that's the thing.
Buddy gets his chances.
Becky and Seth are both pretty on they've both main evented WrestleMania, right? Okay. Like they're on a level, and that's something Becky is going to have over pretty much every other couple, right?
Right.
Like, other than like Charlotte and Andrade, but Andrade just doesn't match up to Seth.
Sure.
Right. So that no matter all the other women that I'm going to mention, like they're just not going to be able to match up with that because Becky was the first to main event a WrestleMania. But the first, so I think this is more of a historic conversation, right? So there were 3. Well, I guess I mean, also in terms of current couples, shout out to Chelsea and Matt Cardona.
Of
I
course.
mean, Cardona does, great things. Chelsea, I mean, doesn't have the accomplishments, but the character work impeccable. So just wanted to shout out, friend of show, Matt Cardona.
Yes.
So in terms of history, I'll start with, how do we feel about Brie and Brian?
I had that one written down because as much as everyone knocks the Bellas, they are a duo that drew people in. They had the casual fan. Like, my wife tolerates wrestling because of the amount I have it on, but like, she wanted to watch Total Divas. Like, she was into them. She knows who they are. Like, they had that power to bring in the casuals or the people not watching. And Brie deserves credit for that. And then, Brian is damn good at wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, AEW could charge an obscene amount of money for Dynasty if that's where they're putting Bryan Danielson versus Ospreay. It could be obscene.
I also don't need any other matches on that card. Like, even if Swerve's winning the title, even if you have Mercedes, just give me those two for 2 hours. I'm good to go. And of course, Brian's not winning. Brian does not want to win.
No, God, no. Like, we can get into that in a little bit. Yeah. That just it just like warms my heart of how predictable Bryan Danielson is. But I look at the Bella Twins as, yes, I mean, Brie never main evented WrestleMania, but I look at as them as kind of the beginning to fill the gap between the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression era of bra and panty matches, and women were just, not really involved a lot in the wrestling. Like, they were just kind of the sideshow. And I looked at them as kind of starting to bridge that gap to the era of the Four Horsewomen, and then, getting to the era now that we have. So I look at those two as really kind of those pioneers who really started getting us to give women a chance to, when that was trending on Twitter. And the whole twin magic thing that they did, they did, I think a lot to kind of bridge the gap. So to me, that's where Brie can kind of make up some of the ground in terms of not being as accomplished as Becky Lynch. But I mean, she still is a Hall of Famer. Like, Brian is, whenever he retires, going to be a Hall of Famer. Like, that's, to me, you have to have both members of the couple be at that level to enter the conversation where Becky and Seth currently are.
Yeah, and that's when the Bellas were up there, like, in prominent storylines, like doing stuff with Stephanie and things like that. So the other one I throw out there, and you talk about being at that level, is Hunter and Stephanie.
Well, so that I was waiting for that. That's because that's my top level.
Okay, yeah.
That, because I mean, and that's where I think Hunter and Steph are above those two.
Yeah.
I think Hunter and Steph are probably the greatest wrestling couple of all time.
Because those two are like top of the top. Like, Becky's been there, but there's also a lot of times when she's down. When Stephanie was on TV, she was main event picture every week.
Oh, yeah. Like, yeah, maybe she's not wrestling in the matches or whatever, but she has been a Hall of Fame character.
Right.
Stephanie McMahon, the character, has been a Hall of Famer with many iterations. Again, some uncomfortable things that certainly came out with Vince, but like, even during the Attitude Era, and when her and, again, it's still wild to me that they got fake married and then actually married, the way that whole thing played out. But again, but reinventing herself and being a part of the authority angle that her and Hunter, and with Bryan Danielson and B+ player, all those different things. And Hunter is, what is he, a 14-time champ?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's obscene how many times he's been a champ, So to me, if I were power ranking couples in wrestling history, Steph and Hunter are number one. And I think there's still work to be done for Becky and Seth to catch them.
So are you putting Becky and Seth at 2, or are you going Brian and Brie at 2?
Well, so how do we feel about Beth and Edge?
Oh, that's a good one also. Beth, a Hall of Famer. Edge is up there.
Edge also a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, the other one I'll throw out there, we talk about Hall of Famers where didn't last, but Cena and Nikki.
Well, so, okay. They didn't get married, so I think they get disqualified. Okay. Had they actually followed through with the engagement that happened at WrestleMania,
it was so magical. I was in the stands. I felt the love in the air.
Nikki and Cena would have certainly been up there.
Okay.
So Because Beth, I look at as another one of those pioneers. Because like
Sure.
Beth wasn't doing, like she was. I mean, she was the Glamazon. Like
Yeah.
she was impressive, to say the least. In her in the time, and she still steps into the ring from time to time now.
Right.
In Edge carried an era. When you think about the SmackDown 6, like he's one of those guys. I mean, is Seth Rollins? I guess let's just take a look at it from the male side.
Yeah.
Who has had a better career, Seth or Edge?
I think Seth.
Because I think it's Edge.
I think maybe projecting out, it's going to be Seth.
I mean, so okay, projecting out, yes, but I don't think he's there yet. I don't think he's caught him yet.
I think that's fair.
Because when you look at the span, I mean, the career that Edge had before the neck injury. Again, he was Hall of Famer before that. Like, I mean, to go from the Brood to the stuff with him and Edge and Christian to then being the rated R superstar and doing all the different things that he did. I think that Edge is just a little bit ahead of Seth, and Becky's ahead of Beth at this point.
Yeah. The other one I could throw out there, you talk about not both Hall of Famers, but Punk and AJ.
They both should be Hall of Famers.
Yes, that's the thing. And AJ maybe isn't, but maybe, I mean, nowadays, the new WWE, maybe she does get in, but like face of the division, face of a movement, Punk, same exact thing. Like, and from a sheer wrestling standpoint, we know what the two of them can do.
Yeah. I mean, I would say Punk and AJ Lee aren't above Seth and Becky in terms of their accomplishment. So I guess if I was power ranking the ones that we're talking about, Hunter and Steph are 1, Beth and Edge are 2, Becky, Seth are 3. I probably have to go bring in Brian. Because again, both Bryan Danielson and CM Punk had time away.
Yes.
Punk's was longer. Right? Like Brian came back and had an incredible run as like the what I'm trying to think of
like
when he
Eco
had
champ.
The Eco champ. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I was trying to remember what he called himself. He had the hemp belt and the whole thing. It was fantastic. Like, which actually was a longer run than because he got hurt after Yesomania. So I would say Brie and Brian would be after that, and then Punk and AJ Lee.
Okay. See, I'm going to put Brian and Brie 2 behind Hunter and Stevie because you had that stuff, but also when Brian wasn't wrestling, like he still was so prominent. Like that talking smack stuff where he made you want to see Brian and Miz, which, we never got that payoff. But if you're watching that, it's like, let's get these guys in the ring. Like he still was giving back to the business. And now to think about the last year or so and what the hell he's doing, where he's like, I'm going to retire. So let's just, pick up everyone on the list. And I want to wrestle this person and that person. Oh, can you go down to Mexico and get them? Like, it's hard to ignore this run right now.
Yeah, he's never going to, again, he's just not going to win any of them. No. Not a single one because he doesn't care. And I love it. What do we got at number 2?
All right. We saw it set on Friday night. The Rock, after cutting a 20-minute Instagram promo, then him and the Bloodline taking the first 40 minutes of SmackDown, and now it's set. Night 1 of WrestleMania, Rock and Roman versus Cody and Seth. If Cody wins, then no Bloodline ringside for night number 2. If Roman's team wins, then it's Bloodline rules. So go ahead and fantasy book night 1 of WrestleMania.
Okay. So in order to fantasy book night 1, like I've got a lot of notes here, written all over the place. So
the Rock's family tree of the whole thing.
I did. Yeah. I mean, it's almost as complicated, right? So the first thing I did was I looked back to last year's WrestleMania.
Okay.
So last year at WrestleMania, there were 8 matches on night 1, 7 on night 2. Now that did also include the impromptu Miz matches. Night 1 versus Pat McAfee. Night 2 versus Shane / Snoop. Right?
Still an all-time moment.
Never going to be forgotten. I'll tell you that. Right? We're always taught. We have been taught in content. You want to be an A or an F. You want to be memorable. And,
right.
Well, I mean, it was an F for Shane, but it's memorable. Yeah. It's never going to be forgotten. Sorry to Shane. Shane O'Mac. So that means they only had 13 planned matches going in. Right? So 7, and they've got most of them booked right now.
Yeah.
When you figure, and I'm projecting on some of these that could potentially be on the card. So Randy versus Logan Paul, assuming that's happening. TBD, the winner of the gauntlet match versus Gunther. You have Becky versus Rhea, Bayley versus Io, projecting AJ versus LA Knight.
Yep.
Judgment Day versus somebody. I'm projecting Awesome Truth.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Jimmy versus Jay. You have Bloodline versus Seth and Cody, and then the 2 championship matches. So we're already at 10. If I'm projecting those, I don't know if we do a women's tag match. I'm sure they'll sprinkle some more things in, some sort of, battle royal or tag feature match where you can get a bunch of people involved. So we know that the championship matches are happening on night 2 because they have to, because we already know that Bloodline versus Cody and Seth is going to headline night number 1. So I think I would probably open with the Intercontinental match. Because no matter who they do, and look, I am wildly interested in that gauntlet match next week.
Yeah.
Because I think it's probably going to be Gable.
See, I think it's going to be Sammy. Like, how do you leave Sammy
but it could
up?
be. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think they've done a good job setting up this, like, making it make sense for a number of different people. Right? Like, Gable's made it super personal. Sammy's on this quest. Like, I think there are a number of different ways you can go. But whether it's Gable, whether it's Sammy, that match is just going to set the tone.
Right.
So I am setting the tone with the IC match on night 1. Are you on board with that, or did you see IC match on night 2?
I'm fine with it being on night 1, but in terms of openers, that's where I'm putting Rhea. Because with both title matches on night 2, the women's matches are going to be lost. And I feel like the Bayley Io is already lost. Like, the fact that Bayley is not at some of these events and not featured prominently where, like, Bianca is. You didn't even mention Bianca as possible matches. I think having Rhea and Becky just start the night off, start that weekend and say, go get them. It's a way to make sure they're still featured prominently. Okay,
so maybe you just start with both the women's matches to kick off both nights, just to make sure that they're still in a. And I'm bummed that I hope Bayley versus Io picks up some steam here again.
I agree,
and I liked what they did on SmackDown, but again, it feels like it happened forever ago at this point. And they had to rush them.
I know, it's so weird, and like they're telling a story there with Bayley, but like it's
a good story.
Forgotten. Yeah, I agree. Like the Dakota stuff was great, and like everyone's against Bayley, and I don't know, maybe it's just because the other stories are so much more prominent right now. It just feels so forgotten.
Yeah. I'm guessing AJ LA ends up in the spot. I'm saying AJ versus LA Knight is going to be, whether it's night 1 or night 2, it's going to be in the penultimate spot. It's going to be kind of that filler match that happens right before the main event.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I just don't expect that to really deliver. Man, kind of booking the rest of just kind of trying to stack up the card the way you want it. I mean, is the only bloodline, because I'm assuming we're getting Jimmy versus Jay, right?
Yes.
Is that night 2?
Yes, I'm wondering where you need that, because separating from the bloodline. So like, I feel like that almost has to be night 1, because in night 2, if it's bloodline rules and it just turns into, just a cluster, you have those two going at each other again.
Which it has to, right?
I think so. And Seth eats the pin on night 1.
Yeah. Well, Seth is going to eat 2 pins, isn't he? He's going to join the Miz in losing in both nights at WrestleMania.
It feels like that.
Yeah, because Cody can't eat the pin.
No.
And you have to have it be bloodline rules. Like, and Rock and Roman, they aren't eating the pin.
Right. Well, that's why I could make a case that Cody does. Like, Cody takes the loss night 1, it's on him, and then like it's in his head like, man, I really can't beat these guys.
You know what? And you could actually set that up, because he has been pinned before recently.
Right.
Like he just ate a pin, so you could do that, I think, because you did set that up and do that good job of having A, Drew win,
right,
and B, just by having Cody lose, it brings, maybe Cody can lose into the equation.
Which
So
I'm
Cody
not ruling
losing
out at this point. I'm not ruling out that he loses night 2.
Oh no, it is certainly still on the table.
Okay.
So Cody losing night 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's Cody eating the pin. But yeah, I mean, I think we both agree that Bloodline is winning night 1.
Yes, I think so. And you get The Rock in there, and you protect him, and we think Seth is healthy enough, and he's good to go. You don't need to protect him too much.
He said he was 100% cleared.
Which means he should have had the briefcase cashed in on Monday, but I guess Priest forgot again.
Which, can we talk about Seth for a second?
Yes.
Like, dude, I understand what you're trying to do. Calling him Diarrhea Dwayne.
Yeah.
That didn't quite hit the way you thought it did you, pal?
Nope.
Trying to cut, like, for whatever reason, The Rock can get away with, if literally anybody else did the Cody Crybaby thing, it probably doesn't hit. Maybe Drew at this point, because
Sure.
Drew is just like on a different level of trolling right now. But just when The Rock, it just, I don't know if it's his charisma. I don't know what it is about him. But when he can just do something like that, like the Cody Crybaby thing hits more.
Sure.
Like versus Diarrhea Dwayne. Like it just seems like Seth is trying too hard, where it's just like Rock is just riffing and that's what he comes up with and it makes sense.
Right, especially when you have side by side, you have Diarrhea Dwayne, and then you have a 20-minute Instagram post from The Rock where he's cursing and he's edgy and he's got stuff like that. Like those two aren't in the same stratosphere.
No. How did you feel about that promo?
I loved it. Like I saw all the hype beforehand and like was doing stuff throughout the day. And then by the time I finally got to it, I was like, I don't know. And then I was in. I was like, oh, that's it. Like I want more of it now. And like it was impressive what he was able to do just going.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. And then they still took up 40 minutes on SmackDown. I felt bad. I felt so bad for everybody else on SmackDown, but it was so good.
Naomi didn't even get an entrance because of that.
They got out Naomi's. God, poor Naomi.
I know.
She just came back and now she's having her entrance cut because it was Tiffy time. And Tiffy had to get her entrance in there. So again, those like you have to find a spot for Tiffany Stratton. Like there are some things that you still have some work to do that it's not quite obvious where people land. But yeah, I mean, dude, I'm trying to figure out where Jimmy versus Jay goes. Because I think you do Judgment Day versus Awesome Truth on night 1. Because then that still keeps to me the idea. I would be all for Drew winning and then losing immediately.
No.
I would be all for it. Because again, because Drew has turned him chasing into the greatest thing ever.
Yes,
like him
100%.
chasing is great. So like him getting the satisfaction and getting the pop of winning because the crowd's going to be behind him.
Yes.
And then to lose right away and then have him chase again, like I think you can pull that off.
The only way I'm okay with that is if he's not re-signed. And then it's like, oh, well, he's going out and you don't want him to be a champion anyway. Then I'd be okay with that. But like, give the man his time, especially if he's re-signed with the company as high as he is right now. Like, let him get a run. Priest has already lost the opportunity. Like, this feels like a lost cash in at this point. Like, he's going to cash in and then lose.
No, we've done that too much recently. All right. We've done that way too much recently. Money in the Bank actually still has to mean something. You've got to be able to cash it in and virtually have a world championship. So I think them losing night 1 to Awesome Truth and then him winning night 2, it still keeps Judgment Day in a prominent space. Then again, I think you can have a quick chase with Drew. Again, maybe he's signed, hasn't re-signed. I'm not quite sure. But I think Judgment Day versus Awesome Truth, again, projecting that Judgment Day versus, because you're not going to leave Judgment Day off the card. Right. So whoever they're defending their tag team titles against, to me, that's definitely a night 1 match.
Yeah, and that gets a reaction. Like R-Truth winning a title at Mania, like that's going to get a reaction. Like everything he's been doing and another reward of like, hey, you're killing it right now. Go get a run as tag champs.
It's insane to me. That's so cool. That's so cool that R-Truth was able to like get a run leading up to WrestleMania 40. So great. Where does Randy and Logan go? Night 1 or night 2?
I guess night 2. Because I'm trying to think also like who's dropping belts and you don't want too much of it on one side. That feels like a night Randy's going to win the belt. Right?
I don't know.
I don't either. Like, now that I say
So,
it out
I mean,
loud.
because if Logan Paul's not going to be around, sure, but he's talked about wanting to be around in wrestling kind of a full-time schedule.
Right. And they probably want him to keep the title. Like, announced today that his brother's fighting Mike Tyson. You want him there with the U.S. title. You want him as a
Yes.
WWE wrestler.
Yeah.
And so I guess talking through, like, that makes sense. Like, yeah, so working out that way, that could be a night too.
Yeah. So I think Logan retains. I think Gunther loses.
Really?
Yeah. It's again. I thought I pitched the perfect idea last week. I thought you had all these guys in a ladder match, and that way you could protect. That way you could protect Gunther, because it's time. Like, Gunther and Imperium need to get into the World Championship chase here sooner rather than later. It just feels like this run has gone on because they don't know how to end it.
Correct. That's the issue. Is right now, like, they had a destination. It's like, oh, we can't do that. But him losing should be a big deal, and it should be a big deal for whoever beats him. Whereas if this is just buried in the middle of the card one of the nights, like, it loses some of that mystique.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If it kicks off night one, that's going to be in that prominent spot. Because I'm starting to think that the women's championships are not changing hands. I don't think
Even
Becky beats Rhea. I mean, I would love for Bayley to win, but it's got to heat up again. Like, right now, it just doesn't feel like Io is dropping that, and it feels like we're gonna. I mean, Seth is losing his, and I'm still undetermined about Roman.
Yes, well, that's why I think, like, with the mindset of that Roman might end the night as champion, like, you want some other feel-good moments there. So maybe you put Truth on night 2, so you get that. Where it's like, oh, we're really sad Cody lost, but hey, our Truth has the title. Bayley winning, like, you try and just make up for it. Where it's like, hey, you got to eat your vegetables, but here's some really good food also. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming the Kabuki Warriors will retain the women's tag match if they put that on there, just because there's no. They're trying to heat up different women's tag teams on Raw, but it just hasn't really hit or worked.
So the route I go with them is they defend against Jade and Bianca. Make them a team, do that, give them that moment, and you don't need the one-on-one match until SummerSlam.
So I like that because, you can protect Jade, and it's a way to bring Jade along.
Yes, and then, eventually you get the breakup and you get the one-on-one, but you don't need to do it right now.
Ooh, I kind of like that.
Yeah, why not?
Because, again, the longer Jade goes without debuting in the ring and only making sporadic television appearances, the more it makes me think that...
So you let her do a tag match and pull a Ronda, and everyone's happy.
Yeah. All right. What do we have at number 3 this week?
All right. We talk about the road to WrestleMania and the road to Dynasty. Both companies are pretty hot right now, but which company is currently hotter, AEW or WWE? Or if you want to throw in a third, go for it.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, New Japan's losing all their guys to AEW, so I don't know if you can throw them in there. Impact, TNA, depending upon the day, they're excited, they're disappointed, they're whatever. Look, I love the momentum that AEW has. Love the pay-per-view. Love Dynamite last night. But if your company has one of the most marketable men of all time showing up on a fairly frequent basis, the hotter company is WWE, because they have The Rock. Like, that's the trump card. You can match up all these other great things, but you've got Okada, you've got Ospreay and Danielson. Yes, I'm excited about all those things. There's only one Rock, man. There's only one Dwayne. And even though Stone Cold was bigger in their heydays, like, The Rock gets the biggest reaction in WWE right now. Like, still, like, he's heel Rock. He's Hollywood Rock. And that music hits, and he's got people eating out of the palm of their hand. Right? Like, at this point, they're chanting Rocky sucks almost out of respect, the way people booed Miz out of respect. Like, they're still loving every second that he's out there because he's that charismatic. He's that good. Like, the Rock puts the WWE over and kicks them into a stratosphere that AEW can't touch because there's only one Dwayne.
Yeah, I hear all that, and I think that's fair, but I don't know. From a wrestling standpoint, we've mentioned them earlier. Like when it comes to free agency, Osprey, Okada, Mercedes, these are wrestlers that WWE wanted. Like those are three guys and girls they can build around, and they chose AEW. And AEW won that bidding war, and yes, they might have deeper pockets. And I think that says a lot to where AEW is right now from a sheer wrestling standpoint. Whereas, as good as Dwayne is he here 2 months from now?
Well, so again, so that's a different question. The question
Right.
on the bottom of the screen says which company is hotter right now,
Sure.
right? Like that's the question. So right now, Dwayne's here.
That's fair.
And
3 in a
maybe,
row.
yeah. Man,
Not 4 though. Sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah. But again, like maybe after Mania, or maybe once we hit June, July,
Sure.
AEW's flying high because they found out a way to make all these chess pieces work that they were able to add, and they're hitting their stride with adding these extra pay-per-views instead of just having the quarterly ones, and really leading up to and we're super excited about what's going to happen at Wembley this year. And WWE cools off a little bit because, well, the bloodline's not,
Sure.
The Rock is going to be around maybe for SummerSlam. I don't know when we're doing Rock Roman. We're going to get it at some point. But if we think that Cody wins, well, I mean, that kind of cools off Roman, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
And honestly, Cody as champ, it's probably going to cool him off a little bit because he's gotten this hot as part of the chase. So I think that, yes, maybe 2 or 3 months from now, the unthinkable can happen and AEW can be the hotter company. But right now, in the present tense, with Dwayne around, it's hard to top the excitement of what's The Rock going to say next.
Sure. I guess I'm just thinking it from my standpoint, like watching wrestling where leaving Sunday Night Revolution is like, this was unbelievable. Like it didn't feel too long. Every match delivered. Like it was an amazing time. Collision is more often than not my favorite show of the week. Dynamite on Wednesdays, you're watching every single segment. Raw and SmackDown, there's still a lot that you can fast forward through. Like, yes, they have their high spots right now, but there's still a lot where it's like, I don't need to watch that. I can skip that. And like, it's predictable and it's paint by numbers. They're hot from a business standpoint. They sell out wherever they go. But just from a sheer wrestling is why I go AEW right now.
Yeah, and maybe the crowds catch up. But again,
Sure.
with WWE selling out as many shows as they are, and it's not even just Rock shows, right? It's a lot of Monday Night Raws because of the work that Drew and Seth and Cody are all doing as well. Jim, Jey Uso, throw him in there, Sammy, and Raw's a good show. But from a pure wrestling standpoint, like AEW's got the best roster from a pure wrestling standpoint. Like it's not even close. But from a storytelling perspective, that's what's got people hot. That's what's got people excited. What's The Rock going to do? What's Roman going to do? Oh, okay, they said this. What's Seth going to do? Okay, that was kind of a crappy response. But all right, what's Rock going to do in order to respond? And everybody's going to be there for SmackDown on Friday night. Like I can't wait to see what happens tomorrow night. I'm not sure what Collision's going to bring. I'm sure it's probably going to be a pretty solid show, but I don't know what Collision's going to bring on Saturday night. I'm assuming we're going to get something with the Blackpool Combat Club.
Sure.
Maybe
you got Brian and Shane
enter
Taylor. You got Jericho versus a Verb. Because usually has some of the luchers that they've been throwing at him. But like, there's so much going right now. And, Hood has said it multiple times. Like 2024 is going to be an awesome year for wrestling. Like we're only in March.
Oh, yeah.
And we have all this going on. You have Dwayne on one day. You have Osprey on another. All of this on American television every single week. Like, it's a lot of TV time, but it's pretty exciting right now as a wrestling fan.
Oh, yeah. By the way, they have to put The Rock back at the end of the show now, right? Like, they put him at the end of the show. But they put him at the end of the show 2 weeks ago. And he had to, like, rush through it so he could hit the hard out with Fox. But then they put him at the beginning last week, and they went 40 minutes. Like, you can't.
Right. You can't.
Yeah, he was great. It was fantastic. I thought it was gripping television. Like, I thought he was, there's a little bit of filler there, but, 80% of it was really, really good. Sure. You just, or does Hunter just plan for it now? Just, all right, I'm going to throw The Rock out there. We gotta clear out the last hour of the show.
I mean, I think you have to. You can't put him on the back end. I'll say behind the curtain here, working in local news for years, we'd follow SmackDown, and there'd be times where SmackDown would go long, the newscast would start late. Maybe in the sports guy meant it's our time, where it's like, oh, sorry, like we lost a minute. That means sports hits the road. So there is no sports on local news right now because Dwayne's going to take it way into 10:30 every night Eastern. So you got to put him in the front.
Yeah, that's again, it's good stuff. I mean, it's amazing that they had that much after cutting the 20-minute promo early.
Right. And apparently that's why he did the promo, so that he could be tighter on TV. Like, what else would there have done if there wasn't the Instagram promo?
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. But again, I lean towards it's WWE as long as The Rock is there. But I think AEW has a chance because some of this is temporary with WWE.
Sure.
The bloodline's not, the way that Roman's schedule is, it's not consistent, right?
Right.
And even the way AEW is set up right now with the additions that they've made, whenever Bryan Danielson transitions to his part-time schedule, they're still going to be able to absorb that.
Yes.
Like it's crazy. Like they did the Jericho run-in last night to save Hook. Yeah. Jericho's such an afterthought right now in AEW, which is probably a good
when
thing.
They see him, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, yes. But I think that's a good thing for the company.
You talk about future success, like AEW is very young in terms of their stars. Ospreay, Swerve, Takeshita, Jay White, MJF, who we forget about. Like, that is a very, very young core who isn't working 300 days a year. And there are positives and negatives to that, but like they have themselves a pretty strong core to build around right now, whereas WWE, which is very top heavy, they're all on the older edge. Like we joked about the Rumble 4-way match where, Roman and LA Knight and Styles and Orton, like it's the 40+ invitational. So it's impressive what they're able to build around right now. And that's, I think, one of the best parts of this right now.
Yeah. Again, right now it's WWE. AEW certainly has a chance. Again, if they do this right, Wembley could be, could be a hell of a show.
Give me Ospreay and Swerve for the title. Let's go.
Trying to think if there's something they could do better.
Oh.
Right now, maybe not. Yeah, that's probably the best. That's probably the best they can do if they do it right.
The only other I'll throw in there is if somehow Bryan's involved and actually wins a title, which he doesn't want to.
Well, I mean, no, okay. Well, I mean, there's fantasy booking and then there's fantasy booking, right? Like like it's hilarious to me because there were other. I don't even feel like you had this in news and notes, which we're going to get to in here in a second. But with Sting's last match, which we have barely talked about, I'm sure we're going to talk about. I'm sure we're going to talk about at length once we get to a match of the week. But Sting did not want to win his last match and had to be, again, which bless his heart, had to be convinced by Tony Khan and the Young Bucks, like, no, we want you to go out on top. So that's what's going to have to happen with Bryan. And I don't even think that they're going to win that conversation with Bryan.
No.
Brian's just they're going to tell Brian's going to agree and then change the result of the match. That's the way it's going to be with Bryan.
Brian's losing to Nigel at Wembley. That's what they're shaping up for right now.
What do we got at news and notes this week, Brian?
All right, we'll start with AEW. Some punishment handed out. Sammy Guevara has been suspended, first reported by Fightful. Apparently a couple weeks ago in his match with Jeff Hardy, concussion protocol was put in place. Sammy still hit his finish on Jeff Hardy. Meltzer says it has resulted in some changes, including Jericho and Sammy, who were supposed to be in the tag team tournament.
Which is why, Jericho is probably, floating right now. But it's unfortunate because there always seems to be something with Sammy, right?
Yes.
He's a young, exciting talent, but there always seems to be something. And with all the other young, exciting talent that they have, he starts getting left behind. He starts becoming this afterthought. And I mean, there were videos that came out online of how pissed off the Hardys were that he did this. Like he got the two-bird salute from Matt Hardy because Matt came out to try to protect his brother. So it's unfortunate that there always seems to be something with Sammy. And I'm sure it's not going to be Sammy's fault because it rarely is. He's always got some excuse. So,
well, to your point though, about like the talent and the frustration. So this happened, I believe, on the 14th. The following week was Sammy versus Hobbs, which we talked about last week as one of our matches of the week. And then the punishment comes out. So like you see the highs and the lows there, whereas Sammy's been in this boat. Like he concussed Matt Hardy. He concussed Jeff Hardy. And, we knock the referees at times. We've seen Rick Knox in the situation to sort of let things go. But if there is a situation and there's a protocol where they say, hey, Jeff's not okay, you kneeing him in the head is not the solution there. And that's why it seems like a well-deserved punishment.
100%.
WWE news, we have our first inductee to the class of 2024 in the WWE Hall of Fame. Bull Nakano, who feuded with Alundra Blaze and Medusa in the WWF and WCW, will be going in, as well as Paul Heyman. The ceremony takes place Friday, April 5th in Philadelphia after SmackDown.
Makes a ton of sense for Heyman. Put him in. I mean, he's meant so much to the WWE over the years, and to do it in Philadelphia in ECW territory makes a ton of sense. So the question with him becomes, who's inducting him?
Right. There are so many options. Like, I feel like they could throw Roman out there. They could throw Punk out there. Part of me wants somehow to have some ECW connection, which I don't know if it's a Tommy Dreamer and like options will be limited. I guess a Bully Ray. Like, you're trying to think of people that aren't associated with AEW because of that relationship, but having someone there or dusting off a Shane Douglas, like that could be pretty special in Philly.
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, if RVD would make sense, but again, he's got the relationship with AEW. I'm trying to think of other ECW guys that would make sense. Yeah, obviously, like Taz would make sense, but you're not going to get that because he's in AEW. The one that makes the most sense to me, because he started the term Paul Heyman guy, and it gives you something to give to one of your big stars to do WrestleMania weekend since he's hurt, it's CM Punk.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Like, I have no issue with that. I think that'd be good. The other interesting part, we know the speech is going to deliver because you're going to give Paul Heyman a mic. That's what happens. How does he dance around the Brock Lesnar situation? Because that's a pretty prominent part of his career.
It's a big part of his career. Yeah. Big part of his career. I don't know. Maybe he just focuses solely on, he tries to stay in character the best he can and focuses solely on the WrestleMania matches coming up. I don't know. I don't know how you dance around that, because that's not going anywhere.
Right.
That's not like, oh, that's like a month away. That's going to be, nobody's going to care about that. Yeah.
Finally, in news and notes, Vince McMahon this week selling almost $412 million of TKO stock. That's about 5.3 million shares. TKO President Mark Shapiro, when asked about Vince this week, said, quote, he doesn't work for the company, doesn't come into the office, and he's not coming back to the company. And that's where we sit.
Good for them.
Yep, pretty black and white there.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. No notes from Mark Shapiro. That was very definitive of
that
how
guy
that's
does
working
not work
out.
here.
Doesn't look, and he's not coming back.
Right.
The last time we went through this, there was always, well, could he come back? And then he did. And not this time.
So good on TKO for going in that route.
All right, matches of the week. Had to go a little bit of a different area because I feel trying to mix in some of the TV matches with what we saw at the pay-per-view would be unfair. Because let's be honest, the best matches that happened this week were at AEW Revolution.
Yep.
And I didn't want to leave because there was still some good work that was done on Raw and SmackDown and Collision and Dynamite. Like, I didn't want to leave those shows out. So we will save the Revolution talk here on the back end. We will do our TV matches of the week. So anything that was featured on television, what did you have this week, Brian?
So the guy that sort of can go in either category is Will Ospreay, and I throw this out from Dave Meltzer on Observer Radio. He says, talking about the Wrestling Observer Awards, quote, I think that we have to add an award next year for best match of the year that doesn't include Will Ospreay, because it's just like nobody's got a chance unless they're in the ring with this guy. And I think we might be there when it comes to matches of the week if Ospreay's on our television every single week. Like, everything he does. So if we're talking non-Revolution, it's him and Kyle Fletcher from last night.
Yeah, it was. Yep, certainly making it. Yeah, we're going to have non-Ospreay division coming soon because, yes, if he's going to be wrestling as much as we're hoping he's going to be wrestling, yes, it's going to be a lot. Yeah, Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher.
Yes, the other that they're out from non-Revolution. I enjoyed Sammy and Ivar from Monday night. Like,
so there were some subtle things,
but he's really good.
there were some subtle things in that match that I really liked. And I feel like Hunter is allowing these guys to work more psychology and
Yeah.
just like the little things that Sammy, oh, I can't do my regular exploder suplex. So now I have to work on different things and like actually having strategies instead of just going out there and performing moves. Like I think we're starting to see more and more of that in WWE, which I certainly like. How'd you feel about Drew versus Drake? Because I had Drew versus Jay from Monday night. Because I also really liked the ending, even though it was a schmozzy finish. Like the schmozzy finish still ended up pushing forward storyline because of the way Seth came sprinting in past Drew and then Drew laid him out.
The only reason I put that one is I feel like we've seen that matchup a bunch the last couple months, which is sort of the WWE style of like you get rematches, and it's gotten better under Hunter, where it's not like we're going to see these guys in a tag match next week and then a 6-man and then a singles and every single week. But I didn't have there. My third one, I'm going to bend the rules of the TV side and go to YouTube. Prestige Wrestling out of Los Angeles. Speedball Mike Bailey and Ali. Those guys delivered this weekend.
Oh, okay.
So check that out, free on YouTube. Shout out to indie companies that put stuff for free on YouTube to showcase their product. Ali, we know what he can do, and now he's just working matches and saying, hey, watch this. Him and Speedball, really entertaining match.
One that I had on there that I didn't expect, and yet it delivered. Riho versus Statlander last night was good. Like, I'm not a Riho fan. I've never understood. I think I've said that before here. Like, I have never understood the appeal of Riho. I mean, some of those suplexes she hit, man, like, I was into it. And because she's smaller and Stats, like, very, very strong, like, some of the things that Statlander could then do with Riho ended up being great. I just thought the whole thing ended up working out, and I really enjoyed that one. So shout out to those two women for putting on our show last night.
I'm just hoping all the Stat and Willow stuff, like, I hope it ends with Willow as a champion because they're doing a good job and those 4 are getting time and they worked 0 hour this week. But like, let's end it with Willow as a champ.
I think they might be trending in that direction, but
I hope so.
We'll have to wait and see. All right, Revolution.
So there's Ospreay.
Yeah, other than Ospreay and Takeshita.
But like, well, let's start with that, Matt. Like, what those two did, and some of those moves, and the turnbuckle thing, which I still don't know how Ospreay is hurt and not hurt and able to go again Wednesday. Like, they did things in that match that just don't make sense.
We thought it was going to be, we knew it was going to be here.
Yes, we said it last week.
We said it last week. We knew it. And the thing about Ospreay is you mentioned the thing that Meltzer said, and we've had nothing but really good things to say about Ospreay in terms of his in-ring talent. We know he's delivering the match, and yet when something gets hyped up to that level,
right,
for something then to surpass those expectations is just mind-boggling. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, somehow, some way, we've seen this guy wrestle so many times in New Japan and show up in AEW when he has, and Wembley and Forbidden Door and doing all these different things, and yet he somehow still finds ways to surpass expectations. It just does not make any sense.
I completely agree, because I'm the type, like, when it comes to, like, movies, like the big summer blockbusters where it's like, oh, I want to see that Marvel movie. I try and stay away from social of everyone hyping it up like, this is the best one ever. Like, it was so good, because then you go and it's like, all right, it was good, but was it that good? Like, I don't want to have those preconceived notions. You go into an Ospreay match expecting match of the year, and then it's still somehow better than that. Like, it makes no sense.
Doesn't make any sense, because honestly, that's the way, and maybe I'll get in trouble for this, but like the first time I ever had Chick-fil-A, like if that chicken sandwich didn't change my life, like it was going to be underwhelming. And guess what? It's a chicken sandwich. It can't change my life, right? But that's like how hyped up it was. And yet Will Ospreay just finds a way to over-deliver. It doesn't make any sense.
It was so good. And that's the thing. And also, like, that night was so good. There were so many matches, and that one was still the clear number one, where it didn't matter where you put it on the card. You know, everyone knocks storytelling. There was no story there. Like, just let them go, and it more than delivered. The other two I put on there, Orange and Roddy, I think that was almost a reminder from Roderick Strong saying, hey, I might be goofy, I might do stuff, but I can go in the ring. And he's one of those guys we've seen do it for a while. I've seen him at the Davie Rodeo down here in South Florida coming up as an indie guy. That match was a lot of fun. I'm curious to see what they do with Roddy as a champ. And my last one, I go Brian and Eddie. I think what they did, just the storytelling, the back and forth. Check out on Twitter also, AEW tweeted the backstage segment with them where they're both getting emotional, and Eddie's talking about the respect from Brian, and everything about that was awesome. I love the two of them. I can watch the two of them do basically anything in the ring, but that was my third. I leave out Sting.
So I had FTR versus BCC.
Okay.
I had that on the list. Like, again, just a great tag team match. The way that Mox and Claudio have really started to work together as a tag team,
Yeah.
like, I assume they're going to be in the tag team tournaments. They've been fantastic. And
do they win the tournament?
It's possible. Like, I would put them on the short lists,
okay.
right? You know, especially as important as Mox has been to AEW. Like, and I mean, again, like FTR is that other group where, you know, the trio of matches that they had against the Briscoes, which are going to be held in even higher reverence now. But like FTR, the trio they had, what was that in 2022 against the Briscoes?
Yes.
When we did our year-end show, you, me, and Jay Hood each picked a different one as our match of the year. And like, so FTR, like we know, like if you have FTR time to work in a tag team match, like that's another one where they're going to somehow find a way to surpass expectations. I mean, this wasn't to that level of like, this wasn't match of the year. This wasn't to the level of but it's FTR, it's BCC. I thought they did a pretty good job of telling the story coming into the match.
Yep.
So they were able to tell that story during the match. And I can't believe you left it off because I thought the entire thing was fantastic. I had no notes for the main events on Sunday nights of Sting and Darby versus the Young Bucks. From his kids showing up as Surfer Sting and I guess NWO, Wolfpack Sting.
Who's got some ups. That was a hell of a stinger splash from Wolfpack Sting. He got up there.
Well, in his first one, he like got really excited, but didn't quite land it. The second one he nailed. Like he got the second chance and he wasn't going to miss it. So he absolutely
Someone nailed the
it.
picture. It's on Twitter of him like midair. And he tweeted out like, "Don't embarrass your dad. Don't embarrass your dad." And then jumps. Like, so it's really good.
Like, so from having that, and then the second that they started bringing out the panes of glass, and then Darby set it on the chairs. Because, I mean, the old wrestling adage is, right? You set it up, chances are you're going through it. So he puts it on those chairs, and I immediately became terrified.
Yes.
I'm like, where is he jumping? And then they pulled out that giant ladder. I'm like, no. Sean Ross Sapp had a really good, because he was at the event. If you follow him on Twitter, on social media, his angle of Darby going through was the best angle of anyone. Like, it was stupid. It was outrageous.
Also an angle from, I think, the opposite side of Sean Ross Sapp in slow-mo, and you see him go through, and you see the glass shatter, and it's just the image of him hitting the ground and then immediately the blood running down his back, like, was so different. I'm like, is he going to finish this?
Well, so that was the other thing. So that was reports coming out today that they had a plan. Because, like, the one thing, of course, because, again, the one thing that Sting wanted to do was lose this match going in. The one thing Darby wanted to do was this spot.
Yes. And where he might potentially die in the ring. Like,
so they had a different match. Okay, if Darby can't go, here's how we're going to fit. Like, they had this planned out. If Darby can't go, they had a different idea of how the match was going to end and how they're going to finish it, because it was just an insanely dangerous spot. But, like, again, I thought they did it well. Like, from Sting getting in all the spots to where they beat him up to then, he's able to pound his chest, and then Darby does come back and does the coffin drop. It was all fantastic. Like, I thought it was perfectly hit. I really enjoy the EVP. By the way, I don't know if are you a Succession guy?
No.
Okay, so I don't know if like their new entrance song, Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, if that's supposed to be a ripoff of like the Succession opening theme. I don't know if that's, I'm not sure, but
Shout out to
maybe
the
somebody
Tony
else.
Khan announcement last night from them, though. Like, such a job well done with the cadence and the excitement. Like, they are hitting his heels.
Oh God, they are fantastic in this
Uh-huh.
role, and I thought they delivered in the match. They were fantastic. It was everything I could have wanted. The Sting, like, to the point where I thought they were going to hit the EVP trigger, and I thought that was going to be it, because I was convinced that Sting was going to get his wishes of going out on his back. That he had the utmost respect for those two. Thought they should be tag team champs. He's an old school guy. He's Stinger. Of course he's gonna go out on his back, but they ultimately convinced him not to, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, a perfect goodbye. Like, I've seen everyone already tweeting out, like, all right, is there anyone else out there that we can do this the right way? Like, Mick Foley has said he wants to lose some weight and then have one final match. Like, Kurt Angle still somehow had his final match against Baron Corbin. Like, let's get some more legends in there and do it right. Tony Khan hit all the perfect notes, and it was an awesome way to go out this weekend.
Quickly before we end, speaking of Darby Allin.
Okay. Yes.
His promo last night.
Yeah, that was a different one. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like, okay, but I don't want to downplay the date, because it's incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
To hike Mount Everest. People have died doing it.
I believe they had one of their deadliest years in 2023, according to reports out there.
And obviously, this is something, I'm assuming, as you go through training, as you talk to people, it's something that has to be breached, has to be talked about. Hey, by doing this, you are risking your life.
Yes.
I don't know if mentioning that in a promo on national television was the way to go.
Yeah. 20 deaths in 2023, their deadliest year. They originally had 17. They found some more bodies a few weeks after the year ended. Yep. Uh-huh.
So, yeah, I don't know if I would have... I mean, he was really emotional. I get it, man. Like, you're going to do something that is very few people in this world have ever done. So I understand it. But again, I don't know.
Also, like, you could not. Like, no one's making him climb Mount Everest in a couple weeks.
But he wants to.
Not.
Like, I mean, again, of course, the guy who's doing the moonsault off the Swanton bomb off the ladder through the glass. Yeah, that's the guy. I mean, he's the thrill seeker. That's what you're doing. Like, that's what he signed up for. It's not shocking that this is something he wants to do.
Yeah, I guess. Good luck to him. He's going up.
But again, mentioning that this could be his last AEW match, like, that was an interesting route to go.
So yeah, Darby and Jay White next week.
Yeah, tune in, big business. Look, I mean, we had the conversation earlier. Wrestling's hot right now. Rock mentioned it in his 20-minute promo. Wrestling's hot. Rock's made wrestling cool. Maybe you're new. If you are, make sure you comment, subscribe. youtube.com/@GoodKarmaWrestling. Jonathan Hood, he'll be back next week. Don't know if Brian or I will be here. One of us will be here. I can promise you that. One of us will be here. Maybe both of us. Not quite sure. It's an interesting time right now. But wrestling is so much fun. Cannot wait to talk about it again next